Hey, everybody, welcome back to Walk It Out. My name is Gretchen Cannon. I'm the host of this podcast, and I have back with me our Chief of Police here in Choctaw, Kelly Marshall. And last week we were just talking about just different ways that she's been seeing, I honestly, the culture change here in Choctaw. Wouldn't you say that?
I think
Yeah.
so, yes.
Yeah. And just some of those stories. And she was talking about the prayer visual that happened after the shooting on August 25th. I'm pretty sure that date is correct. It feels very burned into my
Yes.
memory. My son was there playing in the band, and I actually did an interview with News Nation, and you did too,
I know,
didn't
I
you?
know.
I found that out later when we were done. He said, I also did an interview with Kelly because I mentioned just something about he had asked, would I be confident that the shooter would be caught? And I was like, well, I have met Kelly Marshall, and I think her and her department will take care of this, And he said he had done an interview with you
Mhm.
also, but the interview was just about how it impacted my family and different things. And my son is in the marching band at Choctaw. He plays percussion, and he was over in their bleachers in that south end zone. And so when it happened, he went behind the shipping container and then into the woods
Gotcha.
and called me in the middle of all of because I had just left. And I was like, what? What is going on? Because he's like, Mom, are you safe? He didn't even know I had left. And because my husband was there. And so there were things obviously that came out of that from his
Mhm.
friends and, those kind of things. But one of the things you mentioned in our last episode is how there are stories that have come out of this, just of goodwill, yes. And even people that don't know the Lord, like we are designed for goodwill, are we not? And just the goodness of God has come out of so many different things.
Right. So initially, seconds after the interview, uh, David Reed, our
Yeah.
superintendent,
Love David.
yes,
Yeah.
I do as well. And this has actually brought myself and school administration closer, you
Yeah.
know, but you know, he, um, his director of security
Right. Stephen
starts with K.
Yeah, it does. I've got him on my radar to be
Kiefer,
Kiefer, thank you, as one of the
I believe
guests
so.
here on the shows. Good job. Yeah.
His brother, who is a retired trauma surgeon,
Oh, wow.
were there and immediately started CPR on the
Wow.
42-year-old victim. My officer, I have an officer who's a trained EMT,
Mm-hmm.
as well as his partner started CPR on Corday.
Mm,
Corday's injury was to the femoral artery,
mm-hmm.
placed a tourniquet and held pressure. They did what they could for him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, the Del City band was actually part of the crime scene,
Right.
sadly.
They had to stay there till forever.
They did.
Yeah.
And that was hard for
Mm-hmm.
us, but
Mm-hmm.
we needed to know, what did you see? What
Yeah.
did you know? Um, but the, uh, I guess,
The
who,
Choctaw Band Boosters.
yes,
Yeah.
band
Uh-huh.
boosters kept them fed,
Yes.
and uh,
Leah and Jessica and so many others.
took
They're amazing.
took
Yes.
care of them
Yeah.
and officers that were on scene working the
Mhm.
crime scene and everything. You know,
For free. Not like we'll sell this to you.
right,
Yeah.
right. They didn't have to do
Right.
that,
Yeah.
but that's community taking care
Hmm.
of
Yeah.
our students.
Right.
That's school administration
Hmm.
who were at the right place at the right
Hmm.
time.
Yeah.
Um, that was my officers that were trained
Hmm.
to do this, and I had some, I believe it was radio. I talked to so many people that said, "What would you do differently?"
Hmm.
And I said, "I'd have more medical supplies
Hmm.
closer at hand."
Hmm.
You know, hopefully this will never
Right.
happen,
Right.
but uh, who knows?
Hmm.
Tornadoes,
Hmm.
things like that.
Even lightning. I
Yes,
mean, just,
yes.
yeah.
I have ordered larger medical kits for
Yeah.
every patrol car
That's
to
awesome.
have more supplies. So those are things that, immediately um, come to mind. We have a couple of students who have been brave enough to tell us what they witnessed.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's how we were able to identify
Right.
who is to be
Mhm.
charged.
Mhm.
Um, there is fear,
Mhm.
among the community, amongst not, I would say, more visiting students
Mhm.
to come forward.
Mhm.
And, we still need those interviews to happen.
Yeah.
Um, but just people who stepped forward.
Mhm.
I I went home about 4:30 a.m. My assistant chief never went home.
Mhm.
I met him back at the office around 7 a.m. People had already dropped off food
Mm.
for
Wow.
us. And I can tell you that I've gained a few pounds since becoming chief. you know, even even when um, COVID
Mhm.
started,
Mhm.
when the stimulus checks came out,
Yes.
I had an elderly couple come to us and they had 2 gift cards to local restaurants for every officer.
Mm. That's
They
awesome.
spent their entire stimulus check. They would not let me have their name in order to even write them a thank you note. That's the kind of community we have.
That's awesome.
That's just one example.
Mhm.
I have a church who pretty much quarterly drops off little gift bags with
Mhm.
snacks and things like that for every officer. I actually use that as a recruiting tool
That's
of
awesome.
how much our community takes care of
Yeah.
us. And that doesn't happen
Right,
to
because you
every.
see, I'm not a news watcher, but I hear like when really big stuff happens, I end up hearing about it.
Mhm.
But law enforcement is not always looked at as a good part of the community
Sure,
in communities.
sure. And some are deserved,
Yeah.
you know.
Mhm.
Um,
Like that their character and reputation is to not be trusted.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Mhm.
They've earned that. They
Mhm.
have to work to gain that trust back.
Right.
But just how our community took care of our young people.
Mm.
You had kids who showed up on doorsteps late at night
Right.
knocking
Right.
where the residents didn't know what was going on, but
Right.
they opened the door, they used their phones
Right.
and things like that, took care of the kids until
Mhm.
parents could come pick them
Yeah.
up.
Right.
Um,
Whoever lives at 501 North Henny, like I know my son was saying there were droves of kids going there because I was on the phone with him and he didn't even know what direction he was going. He didn't
mhm.
even know if he was going towards Henny. And so we used the moon for me to figure out where he was.
Wow.
So I said, "What side of is the moon on for you?" And he said, "My left." And I said, "Then go till you hit a road and then come back off the road to the fence line and head towards the moon to the water tower."
Wow.
And in all of that, he said, "Well, there's a bunch of kids going to this house. Don't go to the house." Because I was like 4 miles away by then. I was
Mhm,
like, "Go towards the water tower. I will
mhm,
be there." And I actually took several kids with me, brought them here to the church, gave them water, bandages, because they were all cut up from
mhm.
the thorns,
Sure.
and had them call their parents. Their parents met them here. Yeah. So whoever lives at that house, and I know there were many houses. It wasn't just that house, but
I think I know what house you're speaking of, and that's former law enforcement.
oh
I'm
wow.
I'm pretty sure.
Well, if so, that was a complete God thing then, right? Because that's what he said. He goes, "I'm just gonna go knock on somebody's door," and I was like, "No, because you just don't know
Mhm,
nowadays."
mhm.
And I was like, "I'm on my way."
Right,
If I wasn't on the phone with him or whatever, totally different
right.
story. But yeah, people that just opened,
People taking care of people,
yeah,
you know.
yeah, giving them drinks,
Mhm,
use my phone,
mhm.
yeah.
And I know that there's so many stories out there that I haven't been told,
Mhm.
but just the way that school administration took care of visitors,
Yeah.
um, how officers and school administrators took care of victims.
Yeah.
Um, I know I spoke with Corday's grandfather the next
Mhm.
morning,
Mhm.
and very, very good man. Um, he trusted us that we were going to do the right thing,
Mhm.
that we were going to find who. He actually helped us. Um,
Awesome.
so out of tragedy,
Mhm.
you see the strength
Mhm.
in our community.
Mhm.
You see the strength in our students. You
Mhm.
see the leadership in
Yeah.
our students
Yeah.
and school administration.
Mhm.
That's powerful.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it is. I'm reminded it just as you're talking, even Ephesians 4, and it came to mind the last video we did, but in verse 5, and I'm reading out of the Passion Translation, but it says, "For the Lord God is one, and so are we, for we share one faith, one baptism, and one Father. And He is the perfect Father who leads us all, works through us all, and lives in us all." And that's what we saw manifest, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
People just feeding whoever needed to. And let me say this, one of the Dell City, I'm not sure if it was a band booster or what, but um, she did a social media post with a GoFundMe for our band boosters
Oh, wow.
because they did feed and food and drinks and everything, and two of my close friends were working that concession stand because that visitor concession stand is ran by the Choctaw Band.
Okay.
And so all of the revenue goes to that. And so they gave away everything. I mean, not, I don't know that everything was gone, but everything that they gave after the shooting was like, just take it. What do you need? You know, it wasn't, they didn't exchange money or anything. And so they did a GoFundMe to help replenish that. Plus, because the last football game was moved to Moore, and it would have been a large visiting crowd, we lost like $3,000 of revenue from that. And then you just said some of the visiting teams are nervous about coming, you know, and some of that, you know, and so there's revenue that was lost there even. But what we know is like the Lord will take care,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
We are one. We share all of that, and He is the perfect Father who leads us all. And I do believe, Jessica, Leah, there were so many others there that night with the band boosters. Like they were like, "This is what needs to happen." We would want Del City's band boosters to do this for our children. We're gonna do it.
Right.
Yeah, and not just for children.
Right.
There were adults there
And
as well.
it's not about money
Money,
or
right.
revenue, but the band boosters have taken upon, to do this, and it's a lot of work,
Right.
in order to support their kids,
Right.
and I believe athletes
Mhm.
and things like that. So, things did need to be replenished.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I just thought it was so neat, even in
It
the
wasn't even a
midst.
second thought. They didn't even have to
No,
have a discussion about it.
no,
It was just like,
right,
yeah,
right. School administration,
so good.
I left the field at 4:30 that morning. School administration was still there,
Right. They stayed all night.
watching over
Right.
things that had been left.
Right. Because kids, like, they left. So my son's, now his phone was happened to be in a shorts pocket, but he left his backpack. His Chromebook was there, all of his school stuff, his band instruments. I mean, that happened with everybody. Cheerleaders, football player, people in the stands,
Right,
you know,
right.
all kinds of wallets and cell phones. And our superintendent, David Reed, the safety coordinator, Stephen, that we talked about, Kefner, is it a Kiefner? I'm gonna mess it up, Kiefer.
I believe.
He was there, and I think Mike Hessman, the athletic director,
Yes,
was there
yes.
all night long. Like they just knew that this is what needed to happen.
And they immediately started thinking about, as I did, okay, so what are we going
Security
to do?
measures, right?
What are we going to do differently? And those measures were, in fact, he met with this team at 1 in the afternoon on Saturday afternoon.
Right.
Um, so those measures were already taken. Um, I I don't know why Moore felt like they needed to change venues, but school administration took the higher road.
Right.
The kids got to play. They felt like it was important for the team to play.
Get back on the
I
field.
I
Yeah.
don't disagree, and so we'll just go on from there.
Yeah, yeah. It was a beautiful expression of just togetherness.
Mhm.
I know as a band parent, we use an app where we all communicate, and everybody was just communicating like, I have this kid and I have this kid, and this is where they're at because we all had different people's kids, and everybody was looking for their kids, whether they were on campus or not. And I know that didn't just happen within the Choctaw Marching Band, it happened within the entire community. People visiting, the cheerleaders, the dance teams, the football players, everything. And I know my son, tells the story when he left the bleachers. He had a short fence to jump, but then he had the tall, like 8-foot iron fence,
Mhm.
and he was on it. And that's when he heard more shots, and all he yelled was help. And a Del City football player boosted him up over the fence.
Wow.
And then a couple of my other kids that I'm in relationship with said that football players were just grabbing kids that were running, like
Mhm.
taking them underneath them and running them to safety instead. Like they were just helping people, and people were searching for people that weren't even their own,
Right.
just
When
loving.
when you have football players, cheerleaders, band members that take little ones to the
Yeah,
I guess
to
it
safety. Well,
to
they
safety.
they took him to a building, the locker room, the weight
Right.
room, the coach's office, that whole
Right.
athletic facility. Yeah.
I mean, again, that's trauma. I keep harping on trauma. That's something that our children, you never want them have to do,
Right.
but look at how they reacted.
Yes.
They did everything right.
Yes. Yes.
And that's
Beautiful.
something to be proud of.
Yeah, beautiful. And I'm going to put in the description of this video a couple of links for you. So I'll put some links, to like the Choctaw Band Boosters, like if you want to support them to replenish some of that revenue that was lost. But I also want to put some links that the school administration had sent out about resources for you as parents and people in the community about trauma, like how to have these conversations with your kids, what things to look for. Like I've been working with my mentor growing up. She's a counselor and does EMDR therapy and different things. But about my son, like she's like, is he sleeping? Is this happening? Is this happening? Is he continuing to
Mhm.
talk about it? Like those things are healthy signs of things that should happen after you have a traumatic event.
Mhm.
Like, and just is his progression there. And so I think that's beautiful. And I love the agencies that were brought in to the schools to help with the trauma.
Mhm.
I mean, that was just so cool. Their
Right.
therapy dogs and their trauma counselors and
Well,
so many
and
different
I've mentioned before that I have a lot of young officers, young into the field and just
young
young.
in age. Yeah.
Yes, chronologically.
Some of them you're like, are you old enough to be out of high
Exactly.
school?
Some of
The
them.
one that gave me the ticket the other day, I was thinking, and how old are you? Not like a judgment, like, wow, I am getting old.
Oh yeah. Um, you know, I recognized that with any critical incident that they needed a debriefing.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I'm not trained in that, and that shouldn't be my role.
Right.
They should be able to go to a safe place.
Yes.
And so Midwest City Police Department, everybody said, let me know if I can do anything.
Yes.
Let me know if I can do anything more. Edmund,
Mm.
those chiefs sent me texts of prayers,
Oh, thank you, Jesus. Yeah.
which was powerful.
Yeah.
I don't really know them.
Yeah.
I know of them, but I don't
Mhm.
know them.
Mhm.
That says a lot about their character,
Yes.
their department. Midwest City, which is our neighbor,
Yeah.
So I was thinking, okay, so what can I what can I ask them to do? They led a debriefing for my officers, 8 of them.
That's awesome.
And I didn't see my officers the next day, but it was the following day. I saw that a weight had lifted.
Mm.
Whatever happens in a
Yeah.
debriefing,
Yeah.
I've been in one
Yeah.
years ago, but whatever happened in that debriefing, I saw a weight lifted from them because I myself thought, and I arrived after the fact,
Mhm.
what could I have done
Right.
differently? What will I do
Right.
differently on a large
Mm.
incident? And so I know they were asking themselves that
Right.
question.
Yeah. And
I
probably
need
some
them
regrets even.
sure,
Yeah, absolutely.
I
Yeah.
need them to be okay,
Yeah.
and I need their minds to be clear.
Right. You need them to respond well
Right,
when the next incident
right.
happens. Like it it will happen, whether it's
It's
at the high
inevitable.
school or at Walmart
Mhm.
or at Arby's, or I mean
Right,
it's we're in a world, right?
right,
Yeah.
true. So that was an important part of their recovery
Yeah,
or
that's so good.
their careers.
Yeah.
Um, I was very appreciative of that. Just the law enforcement response,
Mhm.
um, Highway Patrol, Jones, Hera.
Yeah. They were
Uh,
everywhere.
I don't know everybody
Yeah.
that was there,
Yeah.
and there were so many. I was thinking, what job can I give them?
Yeah.
But we're a small department,
Mhm.
but we have a lot of talent,
Mhm.
and
And you have a ton of resources.
yes,
And the
yes,
Lord just brings you more
yes,
when you need them.
exactly,
Isn't that awesome?
yes.
Yeah. Well, you were talking about trauma and just how important it is for your officers to debrief. So one of our worship leaders here is he was in the military, but he also is a former firefighter, and he did all of their trauma stuff.
Hmm.
And so he's got lots of training. So he was asking me about Waylon, like he's in relationship with my oldest, and asking like, what about this? And what about that? And I'm sure they're doing this, but I'm just checking, like,
Hmm.
what's the school doing?
Hmm.
And one of the things that he said ever since I met him is police officers were the hardest to recover from scenes because when they leave a scene, they go back to their car, usually alone. Where firefighters, where they leave a scene, they go back to the firehouse in this big group and they're all together. And that was one of the things in Ohio, that's where he was at, but they were trying to figure out like how to help the
Hmm.
police officers because a lot of times it's like you go back and get in your car and then you go on to your next thing. And when do you debrief that trauma? When do you
Hmm.
think? So I think it's a godsend that the Lord has placed that within you, like the importance of healing from trauma for our community,
Hmm.
because it's important for you, for your officers. Therefore, it's going to affect our community.
Right.
We're going to have such healthy officers.
Yeah, I never thought about that, and I never thought about what you said about firefighters are together
Right.
and get to go back.
Together.
I
It's
just
it's more like eventually you guys are together, but
hmm.
I mean, it may take quite a while,
Right,
right? And there
right,
may be 2 or 3 more calls in
hmm,
between that,
yeah.
where
And I asked, and because the debriefings are confidential, I
mhm,
did ask a supervisor who was there. I said, is there something we need to do differently?
yeah,
And he said, have more of them. And I never.
yeah,
That's great.
yeah,
I'll
it's good.
absolutely do that because you know. Had an incident at Walmart on
Mhm,
4th of July.
right.
You know, it's it's sometimes it's what you see,
Mhm,
and it's what I think about firefighters who are
mhm,
most often on scene,
mhm,
and our paramedics.
right.
You know, I worry, do they have those types?
Mhm,
I think firefighters do. I don't know so much about paramedics.
yeah,
I don't know a whole lot about their professional lives, but it's a lot of times when you can't help that person,
mhm,
when you know that it's not going to come out well,
mhm,
when you have to make that notification,
mhm.
that is what really bothers you.
Yeah, right, right, yeah. This has been such good stuff. So I'm going to encourage you guys listening to just continue to pray for the community of Choctaw. Um, like one of the things that we really felt the Lord ask us to pray into, that intimidation and fear would not take place in this community. Like we want people in perfect love, and where there's perfect love, there is no fear. And so that includes the agencies,
Mhm.
your officers, and different
Mhm.
things, but just keep them in your prayers, like as they go through this process. Like, obviously, the case is not finished and closed, or however you say it officially.
Far from it. We have
Right, long, you got a long
lot more
road.
interviews to do.
And not only that, we've got more extracurricular activities in the community, and football games and basketball games and all the different things that'll happen. So just being mindful for the school administration and our police department, our firefighters and our EMTs and all of those agencies within our community, just that they would be strengthened and refreshed, that their minds would stay clear, that they would hold on to hope, and that God would empower them from the inside out to walk out the beautiful call that we have seen them already walk out, but that they would continue to do that. I remember our text a day or two after was, I asked, how could we be praying? And you said that my officers wouldn't lose hope and give up, you know? And I thought, how profound, because sometimes after that, like my son was like, I'm never playing another football game again. I'm never going on that
Wow.
field. Right?
Right.
But then he was like, okay, that was his initial knee-jerk reaction.
Mm-hmm.
But he's been on the field and he's playing, he's got
Right.
rehearsal every day and he's doing well. But it's like that with all of them. And so we just want to pray that for you. I thank you that you are here. And I thank you that for your gift to our community and
Thank
to
you.
your
I appreciate it.
officers. I know you guys aren't perfect. I know you're not perfect. Nobody is. But it is so good to have a team of people that will work together to